All right, everyone. My name's Corey Wall. I am, until tomorrow, the Central East Regional Rep and Treasurer for FOLA. I'm just here to start us off on our next session, which is Collective Wisdom, a solo practice roundtable. And today we have Rachel Sachs and Ricken Mozaria. I hope I got that right.
That's good.
That's good? All right. To sort of kick off the conversation and whatnot. So I will, with no further ado, hand it over to them.
Hi, everyone. We thought we would run this more as a collaborative discussion than simply us sort of talking from here. We had some topic ideas and we have some discussion points to get things started. And thought we would really benefit, everyone would benefit from hearing each other's experiences on these issues and input, because I think this is an area where everyone here has something to contribute. So what we thought we'd start with is legal tech automation in small firm practices and discussing the technology tools that have helped or can help to automate routine legal work or using generative AI for those processes. Did you want to?
Yeah. So just a quick question, simple show of hands. How many people utilize any kind of automative tech in their workplace? You got one hand, 2, 3, 4. Okay.
How do you define it?
Well, I mean, yeah, that's the thing, right? Like, how do you define it? I mean, on our list here, we go into some rather specific tools, but even on a baseline, like how many people automate responses to clients or responses to potential new clients? Nobody?
Well, sure. I mean, you set up an out of office auto reply, for a day. Technically, you're doing that. So
Yep.
Sure.
I'm gonna say,
And I have my hand up too.
Yeah.
I mean, the first step of climate management, I think, is have a good auto reply.
Yeah. So I think maybe what we were envisioning was some of the more the newer tools, the ones that add functionality to what we've all grown accustomed to over 20 plus years of using email management. And so I guess with automated, Corey, you have something you want?
If you're talking about like products, what I've done is I've used, I used to do a client package. People would sign up with me. They get their retainer agreement. They get an explanation of the law costs in the province of Ontario, because I do litigation, so it's always relevant. And then depending on the type of action, I have, sorry about that. Then depending on the type of action, I have the type of file that it's going to be, whether it's a will challenge or a guardianship or something like that. I have specific handouts that explain the different steps in the litigation process. And then what I found is that I thought I was being really proactive. This is going to be great. I'm not going to have all these client calls asking me every step along the way. I was still getting them a fair amount, and so I actually used just ChatGPT to rewrite my client package, and I don't know if that's some sort of dig at myself, but just so that the language was accessible, and my instructions to it were write this in a manner where somebody that doesn't have any previous understanding of these issues will understand what's being conveyed. And so it was interesting to see, and I edited a bit of what I got from that because it had worked off of my initial work product. But that's one of the examples where I've used tech, and it actually, it assisted me in my work, because what I had tried to do, I'm sure maybe there was a few less phone calls when I'd written it myself, but the legal jargon that I don't even think of being, because it's second nature when I'm talking about things, when the AI broke all of that down and put it in very simple terms, I found that I did have decreased client inquiries about redundant client inquiries, where they're sitting there and they don't have their file in front of them all the time, and they might be wondering, well, what's after this next event that we're doing and stuff like that. So I'm not getting those calls anymore. So that's one of the things that I've done as far as generative AI to assist.
That's great. I've done the same thing with some of my material as well, for the same reason.
Yeah, and it's like sometimes you don't quite you feel you're not quite hitting the right tone of your own emails and correspondence. And so getting, this sort of secondary feedback as a solo practitioner of what the AI thinks is going to be conversant can be really helpful.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I've also used ChatGPT. I think the premium one you can put documents in. I've put cases in and asked for summaries to be extracted from them just when I'm trying to streamline some of my research. And that's been helpful as well. And then there was one other thing. Oh, with ChatGPT, just sometimes when I'm having that kind of like communication writer's block, I might use it to help me find the words to start the email, because once it's started, sometimes it flows appropriately. But yeah, just to start that initial contact, sometimes it helps break down some barriers for me.
The other area where I've used it is I get the letter or email from opposing counsel. It's a little bit salty. I haven't had my lunch. I have an emotional response. I write out my brilliant email in return and reply, and because I'm solo, I don't have anybody there checking me. And so sometimes what I'll do is I'll be like, can you rewrite this in a more polite and courteous tone? And it will remove some of my emotion, which, when it's just me, if I try to edit my own stuff, it's going to be a little bit more difficult for me to cut those things out. So that's another thing that I've used it for.
One of the things that just occurred to me based on what you said that I think we all need to be mindful of if you're using tools like GPT is that there are uses that the generative AI will make of anything you put into it. And so they will use it for their ongoing learning process. So essentially, every time there's something that's being input there, it's adding to its bank of knowledge. So anything that you wouldn't want popping out into someone else's response is something that you don't want to have uploaded on there. So no client information, confidential information. There are tools that are built on ChatGPT that prevent that from happening. They tend to be much more costly, but they do a very good job. I know Thomson Reuters and LexisNexis both have tools where the data is secure and on a secure server, and it doesn't use the data that's being uploaded for any purpose, for any learning purposes. It's just restricted to the use that you're putting to it. And I've used some of those myself. They will, you can upload a pretty substantial volume of documents and have it generate an automated chronology that's hyperlinked to the documents, for example, within that. So you can automate quite a lot using those tools without having to worry about the loss of security of that data. Going back to, I think, some of the early stage automation, I thought one way we might want to look at this is sort of through the status of a file. So at the very outset, one of the things that that I have automated, and I know that a lot of people have as well, is the initial client scheduling and communication process. So in terms of auto-replying, I've used both a combination of legal and non-legal specific tools for that. So for example, if you want to book an appointment with me, there is a book an appointment button on my website, which takes you to a Calendly page, and Calendly is something that if you've booked appointments with people in other fields, you probably will have seen, even if you don't know it's Calendly. That links to a series of forms that comes from my practice management software. And so when the client picks a time with blocks that I set out, so you can't set an appointment within an hour of any other appointment in my calendar, you can't do it closer than 48 hours from now, so I have time to make sure I'm preparing for that appointment ahead of time. And I have certain specific blocks on my calendar for recurring appointments that it won't allow you to schedule appointments for. Then when they've set that appointment, they get an email that's automated that says, thank you for scheduling this appointment. You've booked this appointment type. Based on that, would you please provide this level of information, and would you upload any documents that you think I should see before our meeting there. And so all of that's automated. It's all integrated into a practice management software now that if I want to open a matter has been populated. Nobody has to do anything manually to get to that stage. And I now can take those documents, if they submit any of them, have my AI tool summarize things for me, create a chronology so that I'm walking into a meeting with a pretty good idea of what's going on and able to kind of impress the client on that first interaction. Have you?
Yeah, I do the same thing. I use Calendar Hero, which is a slightly different application, but it does kind of the same thing. You can, it's very good. It links to my my Outlook calendar and allows me to send them additional information. Allows me to direct them straight to the payment portion of for my consultations, which ensures that I actually get paid, rather than me having to chase them down or having to have like an assistant chase them down. And it also, for me, like part of the reason that I started that was to weed out a lot of those tire kickers who simply want to waste my time with trying to attempt to get free legal advice. And I found it very, very useful. I've also made sure that they know where to send documents. They have that nice email at the end that says, this is when your appointment is. I can set it so that it sends them a reminder of the appointment as well, closer to the date and time. And I believe you can do this with Microsoft Booking as well, but I've never tried it, though I know some people use it. And it kind of just depends on what you like. And I tried out Calendly myself, and I didn't find it suited my purposes as much, but I mean, that's, like, I think there's a lot of trial and error with a lot of these applications. Like, we're all familiar with well, maybe not Power Automate, but Zapier and, or Zapier, however you want to say it.
I go back and forth.
Me too, but there's like a whole bunch of other things that can do it. If you're a really visual person, you might want to try something like Make, which uses little icon bubbles. And if you're a bit more techie, you can move on to Pipe Dream or something like that, which allows you to do it either no code or with code, depending on how complicated you want to be.
And Zapier,
those who
for
don't
those who
know.
don't know, is essentially a tool that allows you to integrate different pieces of software that you have and take automated actions. So if you get an email in Outlook that meets certain criteria, and you want certain steps to be taken as a result of that, Zapier will respond to that trigger and take another action. So it might auto-populate information into your practice management software. It might send a reply in certain instances. It might move that data around. And you can do all kinds of things where two pieces of software that don't play well together, if they both can be integrated through Zapier, you can have them speak to each other.
But what about legal tech-specific software? I'm sure. Practice management, you're doing litigation, so there's always been very robust, I think, litigation software that has probably only been improved by the contribution of machine learning. I don't know if anyone's tried out things like Good Fact or Spellbook for contracts, or what else have we got on our list here? Case text. I've used Spellbook myself. I think it's great if you're doing contracts. Oh my gosh, I love it so much. I cannot recommend it enough if this is an area of practice that you do. It's fantastic and intuitive and very easy to learn and pick up. It integrates with your Microsoft Word or your whatever Word documentation thing you use. And they also have very helpful support staff, which I think is really key with a lot of these technologies, because we're not necessarily trained in these areas, and it can be very difficult. What do you like to use?
So I have used Spellbook for the same purposes. It's fantastic. It essentially is something that will review documents, legal documents for you. You can ask it, for example, to look at potential vulnerabilities for your client, areas where they may want to negotiate. If you have a set of standards you want to impose on a set of documents and say, I want them all to be consistent in this way, it will suggest red lines for you for a series of documents to do that together. If you have lengthy documents in particular, it's just a huge asset in being able to speed up the process that could otherwise take a substantially greater amount of time. And it allows you, I think, to then consider whether you want to offer different billing models based on that time savings. So you might want to work on you might be able to move to certain block rate bills rather than charging by time, and make that economically viable and productive for your client, where you can get back much more quickly. I've tried a lot. My approach is anything that's out there, I'm going to look at it and see whether it can replace what I currently have or add to it in a cost-effective way. I think Gavel is a really great intuitive tool for building automated documents. It uses generative AI to essentially allow people to create a document with questionnaires. So you could send it to your client and have them answer a series of questions, and it will put together a document for you based on those responses. So if you are drafting certain standard forms of affidavits or other documents on a consistent basis, send a questionnaire to your client, they've filled out the answers. Based on the answers they've provided, now there's a draft sitting there for you that you can work off of. And I know there are firms that have used it to create entirely new business models of what they can do on a pretty automated basis using that. It helps apparently with newsletters, although I haven't figured out how it does that, but I know that functionality is out there with it as well. I've tried Alexi. I don't know if anyone has seen that. That's a legal research AI tool. Wasn't really fully AI at the beginning. I think they had actual people running for you, but it was essentially doing research memos for you. And it's now moved to being truly an AI tool, as has Westlaw Edge has its own AI, and LexisNexis, I don't know what they call theirs, but they have an AI tool that does something similar as well. And all of those, I think, as with most AI tools, the output you get for anything that is more than just basic automation is something I would classify as sort of borderline C plus B minus student who doesn't have a great grounding, but is a really good start if you want to add that and build off of it. And you have to get pretty good over time at knowing how to prompt those tools to get that good output, because if you start off with very general prompts, asking certain questions that are not focused and with not enough information, just like if you were giving instructions to a student with vague instructions, you would end up with a product that's not as good as when you give a good background and ask very specific questions.
Yeah, I think actually when they brought out Alexi at the beginning, when it was still part of the Legal Innovation Zone, they touted it as, replace your students with this research application. You definitely have to check its work, but it can be very useful in terms of just shortening the timeline for you. And I think there's other things as well. I'm not sure if it was you who mentioned about doing case law research. There's a bunch of tools online that have been existing around for quite some time, like iDissent, will break down your case into its constituent parts. And there's Jury Sage, which you can ask it questions. You can ask it to tell you what the fact pattern is in a sonnet or what the result of the case is. You just feed it the Canley citation, and it will tell you pretty much whatever you want to know about the case. So there's a lot of things that, especially if you're the one, like if you are doing that legwork yourself, you can really save a lot of time by utilizing these tools and drumming down on where you need to go. And for someone like me who kind of hates research, this is this is a real boon.
Yeah. There's another tool that I just remembered that is locally developed by someone in Southern Ontario. It's called Zibit. Is for anyone who's putting together motion records or anything where you're going to be compiling a primary document with a set of attachments to it, with exhibits to it. It does a really fantastic job of automating that assembly process and creating a bookmarked PDF at the end of it that has it all set up. You can customize it so that it would add your exhibit stamp at the front or whatever language you want to have for the cover page. You can have a separator tab. It will kind of do all of the things that you have a person quite often manually doing. And all you have to do essentially is you have all your source documents in a particular folder. And when you're going to pop in your Exhibit A, for example, you have an add-on in Word where you say, okay, I'm going to add my exhibit, click on the button, you pick which document it is that's going to be your Exhibit A, and now it links to that spot, and when it's ready to be assembled, it will pull it all together, create your final document. And it's a pretty inexpensive tool as well. It does a really good job.
I mean, those are the two big issues, really. It's your time and your money. And what can you both invest in both senses to find the products that work for you? So I am curious, how does everyone sort of tackle that mounting issue of time and money and trying to be efficient with their technology? Nobody?
Does anyone have any sort of pretty expensive tech tools that they're using that they've tried to wrestle with how they build clients for it, or whether they build the clients for it at all, whether they treat them as overhead? Has anyone wrestled with those issues?
Does anyone pay for Westlaw and Lexis? That's a good start. Yeah, me neither.
Well, I mean, in a sense, like, I think a lot of, well, I can only speak for myself, but I, as a sole practitioner, I don't pay for it directly.
I, as a sole practitioner, don't pay for it directly, but our Law Association Practice Resource Center provides access to it, and so through our membership fees, we effectively, collaboratively pay for it. But I don't need to use it often enough. Canly works great for most of my purposes, but the odd time that I do need to use it, not a problem. I go either physically go to the library or utilize the library's virtual access, and then can gain access to those resources. Right. So, in a sense, we pay for it, but in another way, we don't pay the full amount that we'd have to pay.
Okay, so that's true of our big research softwares, but we all have our specific areas of practice. We all probably use a fair bit of tech. I do estates, so I use estate planner. It's for speeding up will drafting and collecting client information in particular. I really like it for that particular purpose. And I also use Estatably, which will pre-populate your estate administration forms, and produces everything in probably a much nicer way than I could do it if I was doing it by myself. But the cost of both of those things it's a lot. Like, I think estate planner might be the thing I pay the most money for, other than my virtual assistant, who I have recently terminated, and so I have one more month with her, and that will be it. And the reason that I have terminated her is, by the way, because I think that there are a lot of technologies that I could implement that do her job just as good. But it's, for me, finding the time to focus on it and build that out and tweak the programs, because it's constant testing, right? Constant reiteration, which is kind of what we do anyway, right? Like, I mean, how many people use the same retainer agreement over and over and over again? But how many? Right, you do. But how many times to get it to where you wanted it to be have you changed it and altered it and tweaked just a little bit after some sort of client experience?
I've been building off of the same one for the last 15 years, basically. Right. So
yeah.
Over all those years, as I started to deal with different areas, I started to customize it, and then. I think the last one was when Mr. Pennington last year gave us his representation about the social, the fraud coverage that you need to have in place about the money movement. I think that was the last amendment I made to mine, but I'm constantly updating and looking at it. And I remember for disbursements, because I do use Alexi sometimes, and I've also used Terra and Virtual Associates before. I have in my retainer agreement that, I have specific language that I think I got from
That is true. I am going to pick her up for a second.
Okay. So while Rachel's doing that, and I'm distracted by it, I wonder if anyone's had any sort of thoughts about trying to automate certain processes and isn't sure where to start. And we might be able to kind of talk through some of the tools that might be available to do that. Has anyone contemplated using more automation or generative AI that they thought might be able to do something for them but hasn't known where to start or what to look at?
Or do you want to, but you haven't figured out how, and what's stopping you?
Corey?
Dominate with comments and questions, but I'm curious about email templates. Like I don't use them. You talked about your using Calendly and the Calendar Hero, I think was the other one. Is that right? And some of those initial responses to new clients, but I just find that as far as sort of standard client communication, some of that might be helpful, but with email templates, I don't like. I generate documents like a PDF that is sort of like my intro package, right? But for the email templates, is it just? I don't really understand what people are using them for. Like, is it just like, oh, thanks for contacting our law firm. We'll be in touch with you within 24 hours to, set a time for an appointment or to discuss. Like, I'm not, and yeah, like, and I don't know the software that, like, how it's automated, right? Like, am I picking like I think of it as it's just a standard letter, but you're sending it in email form.
That's right. So for me, in the initial scheduling phase, that's really the only time I use an email that I don't see, that just goes out on its own, which is, thanks for scheduling an appointment. I have different appointment types, so if it's depending on the type of litigation matter that they have, and I'll tell them what might be relevant for our first appointment and what types of documents that we'd like them to provide ahead of time, and that they'll receive a form in a moment, a separate email from the form that will ask them for that information in a place where they can upload it. So that's essentially the standardized form. What I use email automation tools for is I use Copilot, which is a Microsoft AI tool that's built on GPT. What I will use it for is, let's say I've had a lengthy thread of emails that goes back some time with the client, and I'm going to have another interaction with them. I'll have it summarize that thread for me. So I've had this exchange with this client a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to be speaking with them later this afternoon. Can you remind me what our communications were, what I asked them for, what my deliverables were, make sure I've done all those things, and I can follow up with the client on those. So not so much for automating the sending of an email, but the process of staying up to speed on things. Did you have?
Yeah, so I mean, I have the same for the initial intake. I'll have the same sorts of emails that I don't necessarily have to look at. And then I have, so in Microsoft with Power Automate, you can do different things. You can set triggers of things that go automatically based at a certain, when there's a certain trigger, it will just send out the thing that you have sent it to send, or deposit your documents in the right SharePoint folder that you want it to go to, or if an email comes in, it will put them wherever you need them to be. So there's that one, and that's sort of useful, but again, like as you say, clients are different, every case is different, so it doesn't really work that well all of the time. But then you can set other ones that are not automatic, that you can select when they are like kind of an as-needed thing, and so that will populate, an email response for something that may come up, but you're maybe not sure if it will or not. And if it does come up, then I can use it and append whatever documents I need to it and go out, rather than me rewrite. Because I found, especially with the practice of wills and estates, there is just a lot of repetition, and so spent a lot of time like writing out these emails that I had done before, but because Outlook's search functionality is so terrible, I could never find them again. So, but creating them as template emails that I could pull through either an automated system or my old way, but like I'm still working through learning how to use Power Automate properly, and now I have purchased Copilot and I'm working on how to do that better. But like I would just have them in a SharePoint folder where I would be able to pull them from, which would save me time, not as much time as, having it more automated. But, every little bit really does help when you are a solo practitioner and you have family obligations and there's just too many moving parts that you can't necessarily keep track of. And, the thing is, when I was in school, I was an administrative or executive assistant, and I was very good at keeping track of all the things that were moving around. But once you move into practice, I find it becomes a lot, like infinitely harder. Your mind space isn't just there. Or maybe my mind space is not there. Sorry, I'm just going to be handing her random things to play with and drop on the floor.
Just a follow-up question with Copilot. I know it's Microsoft and it's pretty ubiquitous, but it's one that I haven't actually worked with much. So, Rickon, when you're having it summarize the email, is that because it's an Outlook product? Is it just able to look at your Outlook and know?
Yep.
What? Okay.
So Copilot is now, so there's the Microsoft 365 desktop interface. There is a work and web-based Copilot, so there's a little slider at the top, and it defaults to work. If you're doing it on work, it can search not only your emails, but your documents. So I can say, I know that I had this interaction with this client. I know they sent me something related to it. I can't figure out where I've saved that attachment. Can you find it for me? That kind of thing. You can ask it to summarize all of the interactions related to a certain topic that you've had in the last little while. And then within each application that's part of the Office suite, you can have it do automated functions. So if you're in a Word document, you can have it summarize the lengthy Word document for you. I think Adobe has a similar tool now too that will do that within a PDF. But you can have it create a spreadsheet out of certain data that runs calculations for you within Excel. So if you don't know if you're not proficient with Microsoft Excel and you want it to run a bunch of things for you, it can do that very easily. And there are a whole host of different functions. PowerPoints can be automated now, so you can feed it an outline and say, create a PowerPoint for me and use these types of images, and it'll give you a pretty decent first draft, and you can do that according to your standard presentation style if that's what you want as well. Yes.
I've also used, I stepped out for a moment, so I'm not sure if someone else mentioned this, but in Microsoft Word, and I believe in Pages as well, you can create template documents that pop up like in the same program head, like where it'll say new document, make a resume, make whatever. Your personal templates can pop up there. So I've used that for things like separation agreements and stuff that are pre-fill or things like that. But I've also used it for, I guess one thing I sometimes struggle with without having people to bounce things off of is, like I said, just kind of that starting language. And the more I procrastinate that, the more daunting the task becomes. So I have some templates that are like counteroffer settlement letter to counsel, or retainer termination to client, or certain things like that, where I can at least, like, there's a few paragraphs that say, like, please be advised, we received your offer to settle dated X, and now we have instructions. This is our updated position, or what have you, just to get the ball rolling on some things. And I don't know if that's necessarily an automated tool per se in the way that we use some of these other more complex versions, but it does save me just some brain power which for solos is at a premium, to just kind of get the ball rolling on certain things, and also to track where I'm at in a file too.
Right, and I think it doesn't matter what platform you're using to do it. If it's serving the function and it's saving you time, it's achieving the same thing. So that's great.
Can you also say again that the software, I don't know if it's a software program, that does that document organization with the exhibits that you mentioned earlier?
Zibbit.
It's called Exhibit?
Zibbit, Z-I-B-B-I-T.
Z-I-B-B-I-T. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, and I might be wrong. I think that the person's name who started is Evan, but they have a free download trial option on the site, so I used it. I had some problem with the extractor. He jumped on a video call with me. He had to essentially solve that problem personally for me. So it's a really small startup right now. It might just be him. And very responsive. When I asked about certain things, he was already making notes about how he was going to add features to address questions I had, so that would add to its functionality. So I think it's great as is. It does one thing quite well. It might grow to do other things as well.
I want to thank Rachel and Ricken for doing this roundtable with us.